Baby man is back.
Oh, okay, boys. Oh my gosh, the ring got messed up. This is a 5 out of freaking 5.
It is beat making time.
Next week is E3 week. My album comes out next week.
I have the leopard.
This is your boy.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the YouTube citizens, y'all know who this is. This is your boy Dash True Inferno. Back at it with another Pokemon Unite commentary video for you guys here on YouTube. And this is a topic that I've been meaning to do for months now. But with the fact that there's not a lot of news going on right now, I can actually do this. So let's do this. What am I talking about? Well, if you haven't read the title, then I don't know what's wrong with you, but we're talking about realignment in college football. Yes, this is something that I've been meaning to talk about for a while now, and now I'm finally getting the opportunity to do so. So, let's not waste the time. First of all, let's talk about who is going where. So, this is throughout the next 3 years. So, starting off with the SEC, the Southeastern Conference. So, Big 12 powerhouses, Oklahoma and Texas, are joining the SEC, which is very interesting because here's the thing. Obviously, when you think of the SEC, it's crowded. Like it's normally regarded as the best conference in America, and it's headed normally by Georgia and Alabama, and at times LSU, at other times Auburn, and at times Florida as well. Texas A&M is in the mix as well, and Tennessee has just risen up to become somewhat relevant as well. So and then maybe other teams in the SEC that I'm forgetting, but it's pretty crowded. So for Oklahoma to Texas to go there is very interesting. So the problem for them is, well, more so Texas than Oklahoma, but the problem for both of them is they're going to get some heavy hitters. They are going to get some heavy hitters, and basically at this point, they basically are adding on to impressive resumes for the Alabamas and the Georgias and things of that nature. So basically, while they're going to be competitive, more so Oklahoma than Texas, in my opinion, they're going to be competitive, but they won't be competing for a national championship anytime soon. They won't be competing for the SEC Conference Championship anytime soon. And it really depends on what division, it don't even matter, because I think, Georgia's in one division and Alabama's in the other. So, unless they both in the same division as Alabama, because I said this off camera, Alabama's dominance is disappearing. It's slowly declining. They would still be championship contenders even next year, this upcoming season, whatever the case may be, next season rather. But the Alabama that would constantly be in the playoffs, constantly going to national championship games and winning national championships on a yearly basis, those days are coming to an end, in my opinion. So if they end up in the same division as Alabama, they may have a shot to compete, but ultimately with Georgia there and Tennessee pretty much there as well on the rise, and you never know with the likes of Florida, with LSU, who I think is to a degree on the rise, and Auburn and Texas A&M and probably other colleges there as well, they won't be competing for a national championship. They won't be competing for a playoff spot. They won't win this conference championship anytime soon. So, for a competitive standpoint, this was not a good move for Oklahoma nor Texas. But I guess the money is there, so it is what it is. Now, let's move on to what I consider to be the second best conference in America for a while now, and that is the Big Ten Conference. So, USC and UCLA are joining that conference. So, UCLA will be in the middle of the pack. So they're going to be where, let's say, Indiana is, where Michigan State is, where Wisconsin is, where Nebraska is. They're going to be right there. And maybe once in a while, depending on which division they're in, if they're not the same ones as Michigan and Ohio State, they may make some noise and compete for a Big Ten Conference Championship. But the problem is Michigan's there and USC is there. So to me, those are going to be the top two. Now, y'all probably saying, well, what about Ohio State? Well, Ohio State is like going backwards slowly, but surely they're going backwards. And Michigan is rising. Like they are the two-time conference champs. Go Blue, obviously. So, and obviously, they got a lot of their key players coming back this coming season. And The coach is coming back at least for one more season. So while USC, I can see them competing because I mean it's USC and the Big Ten is not exactly on the same level as SEC, but it's going to be Michigan for a while, in my opinion. USC may make some noise a bit, but for the most part, it's going to be Michigan. Now, the one thing I failed to mention is when these teams are going to join these conferences. So Oklahoma, Texas, they're going to show up in the SEC in 2025 unless they pay, a massive exit fee to leave early. But because that hasn't been a case of discussion from anybody from Oklahoma, Texas, or the Big 12, they're not going to leave until 2025. Meanwhile, USC and UCLA will leave the Pac-12 for the Big 10 in 2024. And at that point, they're going to have 12 teams there. So it's going to be very interesting with that one. So I think those two have a shot to be more competitive than Oklahoma, Texas will within their respective conference. But in the Big 10, I think it's still going to be Michigan. USC might have a shot. Ohio State may still be there. But ultimately, it's going to be Michigan. Now, the Pac-12 is going to be experiencing some issues because they're going to lose USC and UCLA in 2024, like I said, but nobody's coming in at this moment in time, as far as we know. Nobody's coming into the Pac-12. So especially with, I mean, not granted, they still have the Utahs. They still have the Oregons and the Oregon States. They still have the Stanfords. So they're going to make some type of noise in the Pac-12, but without USC and to a degree UCLA, I mean, historically UCLA rather, the Pac-12 is going backwards. It's going backwards. You will not see anybody from that conference compete. Well, they're going to change the playoff format now, so they're going to allow more teams in there. But in terms of a Pac-12 team competing for a national championship, nah, that's not going to happen anytime soon. That is not going to happen anytime soon. So I don't like the chance of competing for a national championship. Like they're going to have some teams make the playoffs, because they're going to increase the number of teams that can get in from 4 to 12. I think it's 12. Yes, it's 12. So kudos in Pac-12 favor. But in terms of competing for a national championship, nah. And speaking of competing for a national championship, or in this case, not competing for a national championship, now we have to move, well, more or less, we have to move on to the Big 12. So the Big 12 is going to be interesting because, again, they're going to lose Oklahoma, Texas in 2025. But here's where things going to get interesting. BYU, UCF, which is Central Florida, by the way, Cincinnati, and Houston will all make their way into the Big 12. So that is very interesting. So, because here's the thing, and that's going to happen in 2023, meaning this year. So unless something changes and Oklahoma, Texas leave early, the Big 12 will have 14 teams for 2 years before they go back down to 12 in 2025. And I'm like, what type of math is that? Doesn't that be 16 right now? And then they go back to 14? Like, you're getting 4, and then after that, 2 is leaving. So I'm like, what type of math is that? So I don't know what type of math that is. But either way, more teams are coming in before Oklahoma, Texas leaves. So that's going to be very, very interesting. And one of them, in the form of Cincinnati, is a team that was in the college football playoff not this past season, but a season prior. So that is going to be very, very interesting to see how that works, how that will go. And yeah, I can't wait to see how they're going to look for like the next, 2 seasons. So in terms of like scheduling and like where these teams are going. So let me look at this real quick. So right now, there are 10 teams in the Pac-12. Okay. So there was 10 teams. 4 more will make it 14. Then they're going to lose 2 to bring it down to 12. Yeah, they make it look like this article I'm reading, Medium.com, make it look like they had 12 all along. I'm like, okay, but whatever. But so once Oklahoma and Texas league, can the Big 12 do anything? Well, they still got TCU, who was in the national championship game, and of course they got blown out, and they shouldn't have never been because the referees were trash. But nevertheless, they still got TCU. They're going to get Cincinnati, and that's pretty much it. I'm not seeing much from the Big 12. No, I take that back. Kansas State might do something, and Oklahoma State, once they get their act together, they might do something as well. And maybe West Virginia can return to how they used to be. Same with Baylor as well. So the potential is there, but like it's not visible right now. So right now, the way things are looking, it's looking like it's going to be TCU and Kansas State. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. So, and that's with Oklahoma and Texas in the mix. But once they leave, nothing's going to change there. So the Big 12, I can see them get one team into the college football player, even when they expand to 12. But outside of that, in terms of them competing for a national championship, nah, those days are over. That's not happening. Now let's move on to the AAC. So UCF, Cincinnati, Houston are leaving there to go on to the Big 12. That's going to happen in July 1st of this year, by the way. Meanwhile, they're going to get Charlotte, FAU, North Texas, Rice, UAB, and UTSA. And this ain't going to really do much. Like, it really is not going to do much. The AAC is for more or less going to be irrelevant in terms of competing for a college football playoff potentially. Like, you may get a Cinderella from that conference once in a while, but in terms of constantly competing for a college football, not like they ain't gonna compete for a national championship, but in terms of constantly competing for a college football playoff, yeah, it could happen. Like, it could happen. I mean, Tulane had a good year this year, and they got some teams in there that had like some good records, but at the end of the day, nobody's there, even with their new additions, nobody's there is going to compete for a national championship. And they can at least get one team that can make the college football playoff. So there's that. Now let's look at the Sun Belt Conference. James Madison, Marshall, Old Dominion, Southern Miss will be joining. Little Rock and UT Arlington will be leaving. And this happened already. So this happened last year, July 1st of last year. There's not much to talk about here. Nothing's going to change here. Like, nothing's going to be, significant here. Conference USA. Oh, my gosh. Look at this cheese. So they're going to get Jacksonville State, Kennesaw State, Liberty, New Mexico State, and Sam Houston. But they're going to lose Charlotte, FAU, Marshall, North Texas, Old Dominion, Rice, Southern Miss, UAB, and UTEP. And so some left already in July 1st of last year. Others will leave for the AAC in 2023, while 4 to 5 newcomers are going to show up around that time as well. And then Kennesaw State will show up in 2024. Either way, Conference USA will still be irrelevant, pretty much. Now, the Atlantic Sun Conference, they're going to get Austin, PA, PEAY, and Queens. I never heard about Queens College, Queens University, Charlotte University. And Jacksonville State, Kennesaw State, and Liberty are leaving. So Austin, PA joined last year, July. And let's see. Jacksonville State and Liberty will leave for Conference USA this year, actually. And then Kennesaw State will leave in 2024. Don't expect anything from here. Then we got the West Athletic Conference. But I ain't going to talk about Eastern Conference. I had no idea these conferences exist. So let's just blow by these real quick. Southern Utah and UT Arlington will be joining, and Chicago State, Lamar, New Mexico State, and Sam Houston will be leaving. Colonial Athletic Association, Campbell, Hampton, Monmouth, North Carolina A&T, and Stony Brook will be joining. James Madison will be leaving. Missouri Valley Conference, Belmont, Illinois, Chicago, Murray State will be joining, and Loyola Chicago will be leaving, which is interesting. The Atlantic 10 Conference and the Loyola Chicago will be joining that conference, but did not lose anybody, so that's good. Ohio, that's a thing. Ohio Valley Conference. Well, Leonardwood, Little Rock, and Southern Indiana will be joining. Austin, PA, Belmont, and Murray State will be leaving. And then we got the Southland Conference, the SLC, I guess. Lamar, Texas A&M/Commerce will be joining, and nobody's leaving. That's good as well. The Big South Conference, nobody's joining, but Campbell, Hampton, North Carolina A&T will be leaving. And then Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference, Mount St. Mary's will be joining, and Marmont will be leaving. And then the Big Sky Conference, nobody joining. Southern Utah is leaving. Horizon League, interesting. Nobody joining. Illinois Chicago is leaving. West Coast Conference, nobody joining. BYU is leaving. So that's interesting. And they're probably like their only relevant university in that conference. So that's very, very interesting. Then we got the American East Conference. Bryant is joining, and Hartford and Stony Brook is leaving. The Northeast Conference, Stonehill joining. Bryant and Mount St. Mary's are leaving. And that's it. So let's talk about the big ones, shall we? So I already talked about them already, but like, Who's gonna benefit the most from this in terms of money? I have no clue. I'm not an expert in that, so I'm not gonna get into that. And it's really all about conference play because not like any of us gonna see this money. Like, for example, I'm fans of Michigan, but I won't benefit financially just because USC and UCLA are joining. So I'm talking about money and who gains, which conference gains them, like, it's irrelevant because none of us are getting that money. So that's irrelevant. Now, in terms of like competing, on the other hand, I have to say the Big Ten. The Big Ten would benefit the most from this. So, because the way things stand right now, Ohio State, in my opinion, is falling backwards. And then it's just going to be Michigan. That's going to be competing for national championships, competing for playoff spots. But with USC and the fact that they're trending in the right direction, then that's going to help them out, the Big Ten Conference very well. So they got somebody that could potentially fill Ohio State shoes in terms of competing for a playoff spot, possibly competing for a national championship, assuming Ohio State don't fall off. But if Ohio State don't fall off, then they'll have 3 teams at least that can compete for a playoff spot, compete for a national championship. Because the SEC, they gain nothing from this, in my opinion. Because Oklahoma, Texas is not going to compete with all these other colleges in the mix. So it does nothing for them. Despite this move, the SEC will still be the top conference because the quality of teams that they have in there. But in terms of who gains the most from this, it's the Big Ten. Without question, it's the Big Ten. So that's my thoughts on that. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about this whole college alignment and what you think about that. Now, we'll say this. Like, it's getting out of control because, well, okay, Oklahoma going to the SEC, well, if you look at them, on a map, then, yeah, it kind of makes sense if you look at a U.S. map. But Texas, that's straight up south. Like, okay, so, like, that's straight up south. Now, granted, Texas is a neighboring state to Louisiana, LSU, to Arkansas, okay, to Oklahoma, obviously. So, well, outside of Oklahoma, in Oklahoma State, obviously, those other 2 states, we looking at neighboring states that are in the SEC. So I could get that. I can understand that. But, like, it's kind of far from, it's not considered an eastern state, Texas. It's not considered an eastern state. And then don't get me started with USC and UCLA. That's far west. And they go into the Big Ten, which is normally northeast. That's northeast. So I'm like, that to me in terms of a map, that makes no sense. Look at it on a map. That makes no sense to me. And then looking at the Big 12, which is like south, pretty much southwest or south central. I have no clue where BYU is. So I'm not going to say anything about that. Central Florida, it's in Florida. That's east. Like, granted, southeast, but it's east. So that made no sense to me. Cincinnati is also like Midwest, so that made no sense to me as well. Houston, that makes sense. Without question, Houston makes sense. Now the AAC, I have no clue where that is, to be honest. So that one I'm not gonna get into, and the rest of them I'm not gonna get into because they're either irrelevant or like the name doesn't really specify where that conference is mostly located at. So there's that. So look at the map. The Texas one don't make sense for me since it's now southeast. It's really south, more so southwest than southeast. But we can let that slide because they got neighboring states that play in the Southeastern Conference. But USC and UCLA, on a map standpoint, them joining the Big Ten makes 0 sense at all to me. But it is what it is, unfortunately. And I'm going to call it a wrap. So with all that said, y'all know this is boy New Jay Gatsby, a.k.a. New Stephen A. Smith, saying peace out, y'all, and I'll see y'all next time. Yeah.